Nearly 3 months that we have been talking about how we can build healthy families, how we can build healthy homes, and how we can take the dis out of dysfunctional, and how we can stop the madness and the chaos of what so many of us have grown up in, and how we can create and bring something pure and peaceful to our future generations. How many of us here want to bring something pure and peaceful to our future generations? My hope is that we have given you hope. Really, I think that's one of the number one jobs of the church, is to bring hope. That your life and your family doesn't have to look like what you've seen. Your life and your family doesn't have to look like what you grew up in. Actually, as I was preparing for today, I was thinking of the summer of 2018, which is 6 years ago. Is that right? 7 years ago. And my oldest daughter, Anna, and I went on a mission trip to Indonesia. So if you don't know where Indonesia is, it's really far away that way. Right? Anna was 10 years old at the time, and I was wanting her to get to see that part of the world and what God is doing in Asia. And we had an amazing time there. And on our way home, we had a several-hour layover in Beijing, China. Okay? Now, I'm the kind of person that if I have a few hours of a layover, I'm wanting to get out of the airport and see a little bit of the country. Anybody with me? Right? Any adventurous souls out there? 3 brave people. But of course, the danger with that is, especially in a different country and context and language, is that you can end up missing your flight, right? And you can actually end up on a whole other adventure. Can I get an amen? Well, needless to say, I decided that not only are we going to stretch our legs and get out of the airport, but we are going to make an hour-long drive to see the Great Wall of China. Okay? One of the wonders of the world, so close by. How are we not going to see it? So I hire a guy at the airport to drive us to the Great Wall, wait for us while we're at the Great Wall, and drive us back. What could possibly go wrong? We had about 4 hours for this excursion, but the problem was that apparently everyone else in China had the same idea. Because we arrived to the, very front entrance to the Great Wall, where apparently this ski lift kind of thing takes you up to the top, and the line is like a mile long, and it is not moving. Not to mention that it is hot, it is humid, and we are hungry. Actually, I think we have a picture of Anna and I. I know, I look so young. So Anna and I, this was, by the way, this was after we have sweat through our clothes and everything. So Anna and I, we are in this line. You can take it down. Thank you so much. We are baking in the sun. Our feet are hurting, and the hunger is now starting to be hanger. Hanger? Anybody know what hanger is? Yeah, a few people. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. To the point that not in one of my finest parenting moments, I left Anna in line with a million other Asian tourists, and I went down the road to a Subway to get us something to eat. Of course, I told her that her mother didn't need to know about that. And this was starting to become a nightmare, because we are in this line for 30 minutes, an hour and a half, and we have barely moved. At this point, we have about 30 more minutes before we have to go, and we haven't even seen the entrance to the wall yet. So in my desperation, I go to the front. I see if there's anything that can be done. I find someone who speaks English. I tell them our situation. I tell them we've been waiting for an hour and a half. And she looked at me and she said, well, why don't you just go up the other way? And she proceeds to point me towards this path that literally no one is on, this path that has somehow like spawned out of nowhere with steps that take you straight to the top of the Great Wall of China. And as I think of that experience we had on that summer, now 7 years ago, I can't help but wonder if that is the picture of too many of our lives. We find ourselves stuck, not moving forward. Maybe our lives look more like chaos. It's hot. You start getting moody and hangry. You start making regrettable decisions. You're frustrated. You start wondering, why am I not moving forward in life? Why am I not getting any closer to where I want to be? And what my hope is that in these last several weeks, we have been here to say, look, there's another way. You don't have to be stuck. You don't have to be stuck in the past. You don't have to be stuck in sin. You don't have to be stuck in bitterness. You don't have to be stuck in family patterns that have been passed down to you that you had nothing to do with. Can I tell you today that there is another way? Can I tell you that? There's another way for you. Actually, the title of my message today is There is Another Way. Hay otra manera. There's another way of living. There's more for you. Can I just tell you that with God, in your life with God, there is always more. There is always more healing. There is always more freedom. There is always more healthy relationships. More forgiveness. More breakthrough. One of the main ideas today is that life is a journey of finding the other way of living. A few weeks ago, I mentioned the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus' longest recorded sermon in the book of Matthew, and it ends this way. I'm just going to look at Matthew 7. Matthew 7. In many ways, it captures the heart of our series. This is what it says, Matthew 7:24. It says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. That's what we want, right? Amen? Yes? We want to take his words and we want to put them into practice. But can I just tell you that if we're not careful, we can read something like this and we can almost try to make it like a formula. Right? That's how many of us are. That's how, in many ways, the American way. We're like, can I just have the checklist? Do this, this, and this, and then I'm going to be good, and I'm going to be right, and I'm going to be healthy. But actually, I don't think that's what Jesus is saying. I think we've probably seen these last several weeks. It's not about a formula. If you've been with us these last few months, we haven't been handing out formulas or quick hacks or tricks or tips. Actually, I want to draw your attention to the verses just before, starting in verse 7 of Matthew 7. These are the words of Jesus. This is what it says. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. and to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to, what? That leads to life, and only a few find it. Did we not have that thing? There we go. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life. We're going to try that one more time. Come on, church. We're all in this together. Small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to, and only a few find it. You see, as I see Jesus talk about knock and ask, and a father, and a narrow road, and a few find it, I don't see formula. I actually see a relationship. You know, when we talk about the things of God and a relationship with God, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's a journey. It's walking with God. And as I see this, again, verse 14, small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. As I read this, the conclusion that I come to, if only a few find it, is that not only is God wanting to show us that there is another way, but there also must be something deeper that God has in mind. You've probably seen that over these last several weeks. We talk about having a healthy home, and maybe you're thinking parenting and raising kids. No, we've been going deep. Can anybody see that? We've been going deep these last several weeks. There's something deeper that God is wanting to do in us. Can I just tell you that there are many Christians, there are many Christ followers that haven't gotten this. In our American mindset, we like to make things very surface and principled and practical. Do this and this and this and you'll be good. I had a conversation with a Christian pastor recently that showed me this. This pastor and I were having a conversation about someone in both of our lives, a person that we both know. We'll just, for the sake of this conversation, call this person Bob. And this pastor was saying, you know, I can't understand why Bob is so unsure about God's grace for his life. He was saying, I can't understand why Bob is so unsure about salvation. And the pastor was telling me that he's been trying to explain to Bob the scriptures and trying to convince him and trying to persuade him. Well, I chimed in a very different perspective. As we've been in this series talking about family health, as we've been in this series talking about our families of origin, and that you and I are shaped by our family of origin, by the family we came from, whether we like it or not. Right? So I'm fresh off this whole series. I had a lot of things to say, right? As this pastor and I were talking about Bob. And so I told this pastor, I said, hey, I actually wonder if this person is unsure about his salvation and God's grace because he had a very insecure attachment with his earthly father. I actually wonder if he's unsure about his salvation because he is dealing with some pain from his earthly father. And as I'm sharing this pastor looked at me like I was from another planet. You see, what I was trying to tell him, that instead of Bob needing more information or persuasion or more beating over the head with the Bible. Perhaps this person needed empathy, needed to recognize the family that he was raised up in so that he could find healing and restoration from his past. That's why I can say in our walk with God and our journey to health, we have to understand that there is something deeper. There's something deeper going on. What does that mean? What does that mean? There's something deeper. Somebody wants to live stream into this. Have you ever had a moment when you realized that your issue wasn't what you thought it was? Have you ever had a moment when you realized that your issue wasn't what you thought it was? We see an interesting example of this in Jesus' ministry in John chapter 5. Jesus is going to the pool of Bethesda, where all the sick and blind and lame would go. Oh, sorry, sweet girl. Where all the sick and blind and lame would go and wait for the waters to be moved by an angel. Which is amazing and crazy. But we should talk about that for a while, but we won't. And it says that once the waters were moved, the first ones to get in the water would be healed. Okay, so this is where we're going to read in John chapter 5. It says this: after this, there was the feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first, after the stirring of the water, was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he already had been in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. Now, there's so much to this story, so much that has fascinated me about this conversation. But Jesus asks perhaps the most obvious question, right? What does he say? He says, "Do you want to be made well?" This is a guy with a chronic issue. We don't know exactly what it was, but we can only assume he had some kind of paralysis because it said he could not walk, right? Jesus asks a simple question: do you want to be made well? What do you think this guy would say? Yeah, yes, healing. Obviously. Sign me up. I am healed. I am here. Give me all the healing. But he doesn't say that. What does he say? What does he say? He says, "You're not going to believe how mistreated I have been. You're not going to believe how people are always getting in the way. No one's looking out for me. I have been stepped on and kicked around and forgotten." Right? Like, this guy is throwing himself a massive pity party. He is stuck in his victim mindset. He is stuck in rejection. He is pointing his finger at everyone else, trying to cry on Jesus' shoulder for how he has been mistreated. You see, as we start going deeper, we start seeing that sometimes your issue isn't what you think it is. What I have found is that we often don't recognize this in ourselves, but we experience it from others all the time in everyday life, more than we know. I'll never forget it. A year or so ago, I took my son John David to the driving range. And we're out there hitting balls, minding our own business. Now, I have to tell you, there was a sign before we walked out. There was a sign that said, irons only. It's going to get very important. It said irons only, which basically meant you can't hit the ball with the big old fat drivers, right? So irons only. But I decided I was going to push the rule just a little bit. And I was going to hit a few balls using a hybrid club. It's not technically a driver. It's actually a hybrid between an iron and a driver, just so you know. So I was pushing the limit a little bit, but this is kind of a rundown driving range, so I figured it didn't make any difference. Well, I'm hitting the balls with my hybrid while one of the employees in the cage cart is driving around picking up all the balls in the driving range. You know what I'm talking about, the cage cart? Yeah, you seen that before? Like if you're ever out there, you try to hit them, but of course you never always miss, and they don't want you to hit them. But well, anyways, so I'm just out there having a good time with my son. Guy in the cage cart's out there. Next thing I know, the guy in the cage cart comes driving straight towards me. Like there's no question, he's coming straight at me, and he comes within a few feet of me. Gets out of the cage cart and starts reaming me out. And he's like, did you not see the sign? And he said, no, you can't use a hybrid. And he's like, why does nobody read the sign? I mean, and this guy took off for a while, right? And got back in his cage cart and left. Me and John David were both kind of like, whoa. That was intense. But then John David said something I will never forget. JD was like, wow. He's like, it's almost like he wanted to say, hey, man, I'm sorry I didn't come to your games growing up. And I looked at my son as he dropped this dime of insane wisdom, and I was like, nailed it. You see, what John David was saying was that it actually wasn't about me using a hybrid club for this guy, that his pain has to be something much deeper. And just like that paralyzed guy at the pool with Jesus, if I was smart, I would have been said, hey, let's be honest, this isn't about the golf club. Hey, bring it in. Give me a hug. You see, your issue might not be what you think it is. You see, I want you to have eyes to see today. Too many Christians don't see this, and they miss the deeper healing that God wants to give us. Thanks, Natalie. You know, I can't help but wonder how many of us, when we get our buttons pushed, are like that guy in the cage cart. And people are around us, and people are like, what's the deal with them? A good way to know that your issue isn't what you think it is when you respond to a level 3 situation with a level 9 or 10 response. You know what I'm saying when I say that? We had a funny experience with this a few weeks ago when I put on an old Christian song in the car, with our whole family was in the car, put on an old Christian song that we used to listen to. Me and the kids liked this song, good beat, good chorus. And Suzanne heard like the intro, and she said, hey, Ashley, can we not listen to this? She's like, this is like way too triggering for me. And I was like, what? Are you kidding? It's like a good song, a Christian song. See, to us, it was a simple song with a good chorus. But I came to realize that for Suzanne, it actually brought up memories and pain from a hard season. You see, my hope is that in your journey to a healthy home and a healthy family, that you realize that a healthy, self-aware you is at the center of a healthy home. A healthy home starts with a healthy you. You see, when we realize that our issue could be something deeper, what it does is it actually brings so much freedom. Because we start to realize that it's not about the fact that you weren't invited to the party, or it's not about the fact that the holidays are just hard for you, or that you're just an anxious person, or you're just insecure, or you just have fear of committing, or you're just afraid of driving. No, it's actually something deeper. It's actually because there may be pain that you have experienced that God wants to heal you in so that your future generations don't have to deal with that same pain. There's freedom for you. There is more of God for you. You see, we have to get this because I can't help but wonder how many times we might be like that guy at the pool of Bethesda. We're broken and wounded. Healing is just right there. Jesus himself is just right there. He's right here. But we're not able to receive from him. We're not able to see him. We're not even able to receive from our community because of our own pain. There's another way. I was talking to a friend this past week that was telling me about his experience through a dark depression. This friend had been following God for decades. He'd been doing all the stuff, right? He spent time with God every day. He prayed about his decisions. He was a pillar in the church. Yet when he went into this depression, when he kind of came against this wall, how many of you know that we often hit walls in life? When he hit the wall, nothing seemed to work anymore. Anybody ever been there? You see, we don't say it, but I think we often think it works like this. Next slide. I think what we often, maybe we don't say, we say salvation plus church attendance plus Christian disciplines equals an abundant life. Like certainly the way I grew up thinking that if I can just get saved and come to church on Sunday and do the stuff, right? Like pray and worship and read the Bible and give. If I can do all of that, then I am going to get there, right? I'm going to, wherever the abundant life is, that's what I'm going to experience. But can I just tell you that these things are all great, but this equation is crazily incomplete. Maybe dangerously incomplete. Because if this is your understanding of the Christian life, you will sooner or later find yourself burned out, disappointed, and wondering what in the world is wrong with me, or you, or God. I've actually wondered if this is why Jesus said, narrow is the way, and few find it. Because it's not about just a formula. If you can just do this and this and this. If it was, everyone would be doing it. It's actually because I believe there's another way. Actually, maybe a more accurate equation would look a little bit more like this. Salvation plus church attendance plus Christian disciplines, all those things, plus the power of the Holy Spirit, plus honesty and therapy and medical consultation, medicine, rooting out generational sin, plus boundaries, plus daily forgiveness, plus fill in the blank, fill in the blank, fill in the blank. Maybe you know what those blanks are for you, of how you keep your mind and your heart right with God. And that takes us to a journey of freedom and health, which is, I believe, the abundant life. Can I just say, we will never get there. This is a journey. This is the journey that we are all on as followers of Jesus. And can I just tell you that just as we close. This is where I'm living personally right now. I always have to be careful on what I preach on, because that is the area that God tests me on. Right? Maybe our next series should be on how to handle the stress of luxury vacations. And I could be tested in that area, right? No, but on a serious note, over these past few months, as we've been talking about this, I've had to come face to face with my own brokenness and pain as it relates to my family. While having great love for my parents and my family of origin, at the same time, I've had to recognize the pain my family of origin has caused and the dysfunction it has created in my own life and in the way that I relate with my wife and kids. I have had to look deeper and see that the issues that I have maybe aren't what I think they are. I realize that sometimes I am not unlike that guy at the driving range. I'm acting out because I really just want a hug from my dad. I come to you today as someone that is still on the journey. Even in these last few months, I've started going deeper with a counselor again to help me navigate through some of the hard moments of my life so that my kids don't have to have my issues. I am still on the journey. And my encouragement for you, what I would plead for from you, is that you would commit to being on that journey with me for the rest of your life. Can I just tell you, I've been walking with Jesus closely for the last 25 years. Can I just tell you, I have seen there is always more of God. There is always more. There is more of God for you. There is always more freedom. There's always more. There's always more healing. We will never get there. We will never arrive this side of heaven. Like if I could give you anything, I would just put hunger inside of you. A hunger to be free. A desperation to be free. I just would not want you to be satisfied with so little. We never stop pursuing healing. We never stop forgiving. We never stop pursuing more of God. And if you can stay on that journey with me, if we can do this together, I am convinced that is what will allow you to have a healthy home and a healthy family. Amen. Why don't we do this? Let's stand. I'd love for us to do this. Just the word I feel for this time right now is consecration. And this part of the service, for me as a pastor, I often don't always know what to do. I think what I want is I want for everyone to want this. I want for everyone to respond. But what I also know is that it has to be God. Because the reality is I can't give you hunger. I can't make you want to be free. I can't make you want healing. I would give anything to put that inside you, but I can't. It has to be God. And so, instead of convincing you or instead of trying to persuade you to consecrate your life or your heart or your marriage or your brokenness to God, maybe for some of you guys, you're like, I am here, I'm ready, I just tell me what to do. I just, and maybe that's awesome, because I want to invite people just to take a step forward or to get on their knees or to say, God, here I am. But maybe you're not there today, and that's okay. I just would invite you to say, God, give me a hunger. Give me a hunger for more. Give me a hunger for freedom. Give me a dissatisfaction with where I am right now. And that's my invitation. If it's on your heart and you're saying, hey, I want to step forward, I want to consecrate my marriage again, I want to consecrate my family, I want to invite you. There's just space up here. You can start responding. And if you're not there, you can just say, God, give me hunger. My encouragement is, don't just be a spectator. You talk to God. You do what is on your heart with God. What I just believe is that God is wanting to take us somewhere as a community, and it has to start with us. You respond as the Lord leads you.